Hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about science. Science touches all areas of our lives, health and population growth and wildlife, but particularly for this video, I'm going to talk about sports science. So, the research that might be done on, the latest energy gel, for example, or running shoes, or products that are supposed to be enhancing our performance that runners love to buy. There is a lot of bad science and sometimes no science at all going on out there. So I thought I'd explain a little bit about that and also how to look out for whether or not something actually has been trialled properly and has proven benefits or not. So one of the things that sparked this was what I've sort of noticed is quite a big increase, particularly in social media advertising, using personal stories. So amazing, life-altering success story that somebody's had that's, their running has massively improved just thanks to this one product. And it's all based on that personal story and how much it gets you to kind of connect with that. And actually, when you dig, there is no concrete evidence in place for that product at all, or at least nothing that you can find. So I guess the first thing to work out is whatever it is actually based on science, or is this just a very, very clever marketing campaign? Just because something appears to have worked very well for one person does not mean it is going to work for anybody else, because there, for example, may be other factors at play. That amazing uptick in performance might have been because they started this magic product at the same time as changing their training, getting better sleep and eating a healthier diet, for example, which will have a much bigger aspect on how things are going. So often, if there is a science backing to some new product launch or some research or a review or an article about something, there'll be a little asterisk somewhere, there'll be a link somewhere that will send you to the actual paper that is publishing the research that they've done. So if there isn't, and then, if you're like me and you get a bit geeky about these things and you ask the company and they don't reply or they come back with a bit of blather, it's a good sign that actually this is all just a little bit of marketing spin and there's no real proper science behind it. So why is it important that we do these trials? Because it is very, very easy to be swayed by chance and by bias and about things that we want to work, and the effect of the placebo effect is really, really strong. So we can firmly believe something works, and in fact, it will work to a degree just because we believe it will work. So I'll go on to talk about that in a minute. So a few little tips about how we work out if the science is any good. So I'll give you a little bit of an example to start with. A couple of years ago, a runner sent me a link to a service that Strava was launching, where they partnered with this third-party company. This company hoovered up all your Strava training data and you put it through an algorithm in order to predict your race times. And I thought, cool. Interesting, because this might be useful. Predicting race times is a little bit of an art. So, if they'd come up with a scientific way of doing that, I said it was science-based, then brilliant. Let's have a look at that. And they did have a trial that underpinned it also, sort of 2 or 3 clicks away, following them on their website, there was a link to the paper that this was based on. Now, the challenge that I had with the paper was twofold. It seemed pretty well carried out as a piece of research, but they'd only done it on quite a small group of runners. I seem to remember it was between 30 and 40 runners, definitely less than 50 runners, which is quite a small sample size, which I'll go on to explain a little bit more about in a minute. Other fundamental problem was all of those runners that they'd used were men between about the age of 20 and 35. So not only does quite a small group mean that you can't even draw particularly valid or concrete or watertight conclusions about anything with just a trial that involves 30 to 40 people, and also you can't draw conclusions for the whole population, which is what this race prediction algorithm is being advertised as, based on research that's only been done on really quite a small section of the population. So, particularly if you were, for example, a woman who was in her 60s, this algorithm would be pretty much next to useless for you. So this rolls on to my first kind of area, is thinking about the sample size. So when you look at the details about the research that's been done, how many people have been involved in it as trial participants? A good rule of thumb, although it's difficult to do because the more participants you have, the more money it costs, is around 1,000 people mean it's statistically significant. So that means that it's big enough to start to remove the impact of chance from influencing your results. It also is a big enough group to allow you to rule out the influence of any other factors. So back to my initial example, you know, company launching this amazing new energy gel X. If they're trialling it with a load of people who also happen to have stopped smoking recently, or happen to have started training for a marathon recently, so they're training themselves more, or happen to have also started a better sleep routine and are sleeping better, it might not just be the energy gel that's having that impact. There's all sorts of other factors that with a big group of people, you can start to rule out the influence of other things which also might be leading to that improvement in performance. It's also worth then looking at the sorts of people that they have in that group. So it's still, unfortunately, pretty popular in medical and in sports science research to exclude women. It's much easier to do research on men because they're much more predictable from a hormonal perspective. So a woman's body is functioning in a reasonably different way at different points in their monthly cycle. Men's don't, they're fairly stable week on week. So it's easier to carry out a scientific study where you're specifically trying to find out a benefit of a certain thing if you're using a bloke than trying to deal with that complexity of women. But that unfortunately means that drugs on the market, things you might get from your doctor, energy gels or whatever, have never been trialled on men. So on women. So all the performance benefits are going to be different. They might not have the same performance benefits for women. Thinking about some of the terminology now that's used in trials. So there's this concept called double-blind. So this means that neither the researchers, so the people carrying out the trial, or the participants know what it is they're taking. So let's use, for example, painkillers as an example. They're just standard white pills. They'll be given to different people who happen to be in pain. Some of them will be painkillers. One group will be given actual painkillers, this new drug, and other people will be given just a sugar pill that looks exactly the same. Now, if the researchers know who's in which group, they might be, oh, try this amazing painkiller, it'll make you feel better. And with the sugar pill, they're like, oh, just take this painkiller. So they might be subtly or inadvertently or deliberately trying to influence the result of the outcomes of the trial. And obviously, if you know that you're just taking the sugar pill, you're not going to have any expectations of feeling any different at all. Whereas if you didn't know which one you were taking, that leads to the placebo effect being able to be ruled out. So you can see people take the sugar pill, but they still might feel a little bit better just because they think they took something that was going to help and somebody cared enough to give them something that they thought might help. So a double-blind trial is useful to remove bias, but also to help us quantify and deal with the impact of the placebo effect. So the placebo effect is real. Does have a huge influence on the outcomes of things. And this is why I'm a great believer in, if you genuinely believe that something that you do, part of your routine, is really helping you or your recovery, your performance, whatever it might be, and you believe that, keep doing it because it probably is helping you because you believe it's helping you. So a couple of examples. They did a trial, ethics of this, slightly questionable for me, knee surgery. So people who had knee pain. They gave one group a proper knee surgery, so they anaesthetised them, they went into the knee, they cleared things up, they trimmed stuff, they did whatever they were planned to do to help that person's knee pain. The other group, they anaesthetised them, they gave them scars that made it look like they had knee surgery, but they didn't actually do anything while they were under, they just gave them the scars. And the people that had this sham knee surgery, where they didn't actually do anything other than give them the scars, reported an improvement in their knee pain. That is the power of the placebo effect. It's brilliant and it's real. But when we're doing trials, we want to make sure it's not just, oh my God, this amazing company have given me Energy Gel X. This is going to make me, they say it's going to make me feel amazing and perform better. And just by saying those things, you probably are going to perform better. They've shown that the placebo effect increases if you spend more money on something. So the more money you spend on gadget X, the more likely it is to more positively affect you because you've put more into it. You believe in it more because you've spent more of your money on it. So it's quite an interesting one. Another interesting finding is, for example, was a trial that they did around sports drinks. So if they gave people a sports drink that they thought was a bona fide sports drink that had carbohydrates, electrolytes in them, would benefit them physically, but in fact it didn't. It was just sweeteners and water, so it had no real benefit to them at all. They still performed better, almost as much of an increase as you'd get if you have the real sports drink. So that's why we need to design trials to avoid the placebo effect skewing the results. So this is where, excuse me, something called a randomised control trial comes in. So the controlled aspect of that trial means that you have a control group of people. So in my energy gel example, you might have 3 groups of people. You might have 3 groups who, one group who is on the shiny new energy gel X product, another group that has the company's older, 2 or 3 years older energy gel recipe, and another group that has a fake energy gel, looks the same, tastes the same, but doesn't actually have any sort of glucose or electrolytes or anything in it at all. So you need to have that group so that you can offset any of the impacts of just, oh, amazing, I think this energy gel is going to be awesome, is going to have on the results, to see if it actually has good results. So that's the controlled element of randomised controlled trial. The randomised element is that neither the participant nor the researcher knows which group they're in. So the researchers can either intentionally or unintentionally bias things by kind of say, oh, this is an amazing energy gel, or have an energy gel. And also, as we've explained with the placebo effect, you don't want the participant to know which group they're in either. So randomised controlled trials, something to look out for. Following the money is also a good one. So who is paying for the trial? So I see a lot of, this kinesiology taping company is paid for a study that oddly enough says that kinesiology taping helps with loads of things. This energy gel company has oddly enough paid for a trial that says energy gels are the most amazing sports nutrition product. Always take them with a little bit of a pinch of salt. The one thing I try and remember is that tobacco companies for many, many years were funding trials that showed that smoking didn't harm our health. So having an awareness of who's paying for it is quite a good idea. And there are also some companies like that are also using another little trick where they will start a trial, they'll get so far and the results don't look good. The results do not look good for Energy Gel X. In fact, it's worse than the product that they have on the market already. Bad news. So they just stop the trial before it gets to the end and before they have to publish any results. Sneaky. So there are some organisations that are trying to force people to have to register every trial. So there's a list of all the trials that were started. So it at least gives us a little bit of a clue as to those ones that were sneakily just stopped because they weren't giving that company that was funding them the results that they wanted. Because we can learn as much from trials that didn't get the expected results and why they didn't get those expected results. That's almost as interesting, if not more interesting, as the trials that went as we hoped and expected they would. The other one to think about is systematic reviews. So a systematic review is where a group of researchers get together and look at all of the trials that have been taken place in a particular area. So they would take all of that data, that automatically increases your sample size because there's all the participants of all of those trials are suddenly involved in this data review. It reduces the likelihood of chance of slightly badly kind of put together trials from influencing outcomes, and it gives you a much better chance of looking across the whole set of data and drawing some much more realistic and I guess correct or more likely to be correct conclusions. So a systematic review is a great thing if that exists in that area of research. Having a little bit of a think about peer review and publishing of trials as well. So all trials should be peer reviewed. So that means that somebody who is also an expert in that field of research has had a look at it, had a look at how the trial's been designed and conducted, make sure that they can't spot any obvious errors and are kind of find that it's been done with a thorough scientific process. And also looking who's published it. So if I found a piece of research that had been sort of side published in a small journal, like, I don't know, one I've made up, like UFOs Anonymous, versus something that had been published in the British Medical Journal, I'd probably have a bit more confidence in the reliability of the results of the one that was in the British Medical Journal. It's always worth saying though that no matter how well the science has been done and how, if they've ticked all of the boxes that I've gone through today and they put this amazing study together, actually Energy Gel X is awesome. But what it will probably say in the conclusions of the actual research paper is in 40% of cases, it improved performance by X in the latter stages of a marathon, for example. So there is never one size fits all, back to a video I did previously. And there will always be that detail in a trial. You know, it won't improve everything by the same amount across the board. Some people will have bigger improvements, some people will have smaller improvements, some people it might even make them worse. Who knows? You know, when things get summarised and turned into a press release or turned into a bit of a marketing campaign, they tend to forget about the fact that not everybody in that trial will have responded in the same way. So that's always one to bear in mind as well. So if, like me, you were a little bit of a geek, love digging into the detail of these things and asking questions of these kind of clickbaity headlines and well-funded marketing campaigns, then there's a great book that I'd recommend, Ben Goldacre, Bad Science, who gives you much more of a detailed and well-written overview of how to spot the dodginess in scientific trials. He's got a website, badscience.net, as well, if you want to find out more. But just with those few little tips, it is worth just digging. When you see those headlines that seem a little bit too good to be true, or maybe they don't even, maybe, you know, you're just interested in, do energy gels, you know, make a massive difference? Is it worth spending X amount of money on this snazzy new product or nutrition thing? Or actually, could you make bigger gains by making different changes to your training, to the sleep you get, to the food that you eat every day? Usually the answer is the biggest benefits comes from the simple things. Hope that's useful.